So, hi everyone, my name is Arthur Fau. I'm a product manager working with CRM Analytics Salesforce team, mainly focusing on what we call the experience side. So just to clarify, right, we have like three big pillars. We have Einstein Discovery, which is more the the artificial intelligence, data predictions, all of that stuff. You have the data flows, kind of the back end side of the work, right? And then you can have the front end side, which is what we label as the experience. So I work on that side specifically around dashboard authoring and enhancing the capabilities and making things easier to achieve for you guys. And so really glad to be here today to be talking about a new feature that we released fairly recently, the input widget, which is really helping towards what we called and labeled as a whole the what if analysis, right? Allowing you guys to build scenarios and drive scenarios, right? So let me kick it off today with kind of, I'll go into some of the use cases, give you kind of ideas of what can you use this new feature for, right? What are the benefits? What are use cases? What industries can you apply that to, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll kind of go into some demos. I'll show you one of the demos we built, and then I'll pass it on to Manny, who built an awesome demo, which is much more fun than the one I did. And then we can go back. I can share a little bit more about some of the work that we are currently doing and that will be coming up for you guys in the upcoming release. And we'll show you also how we've built it, right? The demos that we've done, so that you can see like how it's done today and how it will be done tomorrow in the next releases. And then once that's done, we can open it up. I can share a little bit more. We're gonna have some open questions about, where some use cases that you don't really see this working for, or things that you'd like to see enhancements. Maybe some of you already started using it and would like newer things. So we can chat more openly about all that stuff. So hopefully that sounds great for everyone. And again, yeah, if you have, I'm not monitoring the chat, but if there's any questions, feel free to just let me know, Will or Maddie or Ines, and I can just happy to take them. All right, so as usual, I didn't actually have like a slides on like, make all your purchasing decision based on what's currently available in the product. I don't have that one here, but please make sure that it's recorded so you know about all that stuff. But the first thing we always do, right? Thank you very much for attending this. It's super great to see all of you folks connecting here to learn more about this. So super excited to share more. So let's talk about what if analysis. And what is it, right? What is what if? What do we label as this? Well, the idea here is allowing you to evaluate the impact of a business decision on future outcomes, right? You want to be able to see how something will be impacted before actually making those decisions, right? And changing and applying those things. So the reason why, when we looked at this new initiative, the reason why we were thinking of like, why do you need this? Well, this is something that it applies to a lot of different industries, right? And I'll show you some of the use cases that we had in mind when we built this. It applies to the sales manager, the service team leaders, right? There's a lot of areas that we're running scenarios and being able to almost see and predict the future, right? Is super relevant and useful, right? So we wanted to make it easier for you to achieve this. There were capabilities that we had that allow you to, drive certain scenarios, but it wasn't that easy to do, and it wasn't always really a great experience either. So what we've done, and kind of that really, what you see here is really like one of the first mock-ups that we had in mind when we thought about what if and this input slider, right? It's like, all right, I'm a sales manager doing my sales forecasting, right? This is really base 101 Salesforce, and I'm trying to evaluate the decisions impact that so that I can ensure that I attain the forecast that I need to get to, right? So you have like 3 little sliders: commit, best case, and pipeline, and you want to see how, when playing around with those, how those are affecting your forecast, right? And the biggest question here is, am I going to be able to get to the quota that I've agreed to achieve this quarter, right? Another one, and so I'll go into a bit of these use cases, right? Another one that we had, right, was manufacturing, right? I want to be able to figure out what kind of rebates can I apply to when I'm doing rebates, right? Like I want to see I'm selling this, I have those orders, I have a little, I'm not actually sure which industry this is in, or specifically, or I know it's in manufacturing, but I don't know the products here that you see on the right side. But the idea is you want to be able to calculate what kind of rebates are you going to be able to do on certain products so that you're still achieving the revenue that you're interested in, right? The next one is around sustainability, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the net zero clouds that Salesforce is launching. So those guys are currently using the input widgets and including it in their platform because they wanted to be able to easily generate scenarios where they can calculate, the carbon emissions based on different scenarios, right? Like what happens to my carbon emissions if I'm, like changing the population here or changing how much cargoes are going to be shipping from this place to another. Another very similar use case to this one that I've actually chatted a lot about with some customers based in Europe is around cars manufacturing, right? So we have, I won't cite the names of the manufacturers, but what they want to do pretty much is they want to know from their factories how much the manufacturing of one car model will affect their carbon emissions. And so what they want to do pretty much is change the different pieces and the different components of each of those cars to see like, all right, if I replace this motor by another one, this engine, right? I want a different engine. How is this new engine going to be impacting my carbon emissions, right? And if I change the wheels or the tires of this car, like what is it? How is it going to be impacting it, right? So lots of things happening around this domain, right? Everyone wants to go nowadays. Everyone wants to go carbon neutral. And so there's a lot of scenarios that needs to be driven to kind of figure out like how can we get there. And so this is where this input widget comes in handy, and obviously more in the future. Supply chain is another example. Again, right? You have a control tower, and you want to be able to figure out like, hey, where should we be putting our resources now, based on the fact that we need to provide that much supply, right? Like we need to manufacture like those things, right? Where do I put my resources, right? Similar one to this is the call center, right? You have the call center and you want to figure out where should we allocate this group of agents, right? On which time slot should we allocate those guys based on the number of calls we receive per hour, right? So you can generate scenarios and see, all right, like if we know Thanksgiving is coming up or Black Friday is coming up, we know we're going to have an increase there. Like let's say we have an increase of 300%, right? You generate that on the input widget, you slide that to 300%. What is it going to look like, and what should we do with the different call centers we have and the agents? All right. So let me stop here, and I actually messed up my slide order because I wanted to have my demo slide before my future. So with that little hiccup, I'll go into my demo just for now because I'm sharing my screen, so it'll be faster. And then I'll pass it on to you, Manny, so that you can share a bit more about the demo you prepared. Do we have any questions? I didn't pay attention. Is everything like crystal clear or all good? All right, I'll take that as this is all good.
Yeah, no questions so far.
Awesome. So what you see here is something that looks hopefully very similar to the slide I showed to you a couple of minutes ago, where we have 3 sliders on the left side here, and you can see how those are affecting potentially your profit forecast, right? In this case, we're talking about profits, and you have those different sliders are going to allow us to change a rebate value and see how this is going to be impacting your forecast, or changing certain expenses and good costs that could impact it as well. So what I've done here is I've created 3 input widgets, right? Those 3 sliders, and each of them is connected to the other widgets on your dashboard, right? So here you have 3 widgets that should be very familiar to you. You have a number widget right here at the top with some conditional formatting that changes when I'm going to be changing the values of the sliders. You have a table widget at the bottom here, also with conditional formatting. So we see here the sales of different regions per different customer segments. And the last one is this profit forecast here chart with a little prediction line so that we can see, up to now and then in the future, how would this data look like? Obviously here, it's not really the future because it's 2019 to 2020, but ignore that just for the purpose of the demo. So very simple. I mean, the demo is not going to take forever. It's very straightforward here. If I'm sliding this rebate percentage to whatever percent I want, right? You can see that everything else is getting impacted. That's why I've added conditional formatting, so that it's also easier to visualize it. But you can see the number here has changed. So it has this line, but it's a bit harder to show. So I'll move the other one so you can clearly see. And here, same, you see that more cells have gotten red, and that's because the value has dropped below 500,000, if I remember correctly. So same here, if I increase the good cost, you can now clearly see all those values have gotten red. And you can see the chart predictions is also impacted, right? It looks very different than it used to. So this is just a very basic example of having different, KPIs that will be relevant to you and seeing how each of them can be impacting either your profits or the number of agents. I mean, it applies to all the use cases I just listed, right? And so you can link this to any other widgets today using findings, and that's the biggest thing that we wanted to focus on next. So I'll let Manny demo his, and then I can show you a little bit of some of the stuff that we're building now and how we're making that easier. Maybe Manny, can you go into can you show your demo and then kind of dive a little deeper on how you built it and how you created this connection?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. I'm Manny Omidei, for those that don't know me. If you just bear with me a second while I share my screen. So I actually have two really brief demos to show. I think one's a bit more basic because I wanted to just touch a little bit on how you might put an input widget together and make it work. And then I got something a bit more fun. So Arthur is he's focused on more business scenarios. I had a look at a couple of real world scenarios, and the first one's a bit depressing. I was at Dreamforce in September, and on my way back, when I got back home, it was just pure chaos because of the rise in interest rates. And so I figured this would be a useful initial demo just to look at the effect on the effect of rising interest rates. So if you just bear with me a moment. So first of all, you see, I have a bunch of sliders here. I have a couple of sliders here, which at the moment have no effect on this dashboard. I just got a quick mortgage repayment data set just based on the purchase of a house for 670,000 with an arrangement fee of just under 1,000, a 20% deposit with a fixed interest rate term for 24 months, and then standard variable rate after that. As you can see here, so we have I think 24 payments of 2.03%. Then it goes up to 5.74%. With this data set, all the numbers were in here already, so I have to do a little bit, just try and reproduce some of the calculations. So I won't show you I'll show you the query now, and then I'll show you how to make it dynamic with an input widget. So I'll go here. So first of all, you can see the input widget is selected here, and when you first bring it onto a dashboard canvas, you have a number of options to configure it. The main ones of those are in the input values here. So you can see you have a choice between a slider and a freeform input. For the purposes of this one, I've used a slider. I'll show you what a freeform input looks like with the second one. And then you can choose. You have some flexibility around the format and the way the numbers display. You pick your minimum and maximum values, and also your increments. For this one, I'm going at 0.01 because obviously I'm looking at interest rates here, but you can go in whole numbers or anything here. I just figured I'd do a couple of different things to kind of show off as much of this as possible. As you can see here, these inputs are just very creatively labeled as input 1 and input 2. And if I now go into my query, we're looking at this bit here, which I'm just going to replace with a statement and then talk you through it. But for those who are familiar with SACL, you see here, this is just a basic query, just generating the dates, a start figure, a payment number, interest rate, etc. These are all static values at the moment, and I'm going to change those to add some dynamism. So if you look at that now, I have replaced that, and you'll see here we have 2 dynamic values here linked to each of the input widgets that I've just added. So you can see here we've got the first one here is the start value. That's just based on the purchase price minus whatever I've added as a deposit. And then we also have an interest rate selector here. So in the first 24 months, the rate will be fixed, and then it will become dynamic afterwards. So if I go back, you'll see here now, when I now move the sliders, keep an eye on so the fixed term repayment isn't going to change when I change the interest rate because that's fixed. But the variable repayment, the payments from month 25 onwards, those will then begin to change.
Manny, so just a quick question come in from Gilles. Is it asking how sort of, could you sort of retake those steps about how you got back to the screen where you could expose the JSON with the navigation, just to step through it so slightly more slowly?
Sure, no worries. My fault for assuming everybody.
No, Manny, what she's interested in is this navigation add-on that you have. I think it's a Chrome add-on, or right? Like if you do Command E, the navigation little add-on that you have. I think
okay, yeah.
Where you got.
That's the EA dashboard helper. Sorry, I've had it for so long. I kind of forgot I have it. But yeah. So I do on my Mac. I do Command Shift and F.
Oh, that stopped presenting my book.
Welcome to live demos. All right, let me share my screen again.
Sorry, I've completely derailed it all now.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to try Command Shift and F, and that brings up the navigation panel on the side. And then it's just this is quite a useful add-on, but it makes it easier to kind of troubleshoot or debug your queries. So for instance, you can see this is a SACL query here, which is a bit kind of it's a bit long-winded, and especially if you're not a coder like myself. But actually, just going into the same query here, just putting everything out in lines and just making it easier to read. This is where I kind of do all my debugging. So yeah, that's the EA dashboard helper. I will put a link in the chat, or if you just Google it, you should find it. But I can put a link to chat after I finish. Will, was there anything else? I can't see the question.
No, that was all.
No, that was it. I've just put a link in the chat to, I think,
okay,
that extension.
All right. So where was I? Okay. So am I going to have to add this back? I don't think so. Okay, cool. So hopefully when I move this slider, we should start to see some activity. Yep. So you can see here that, so I'll go back to where I started. So if we're kind of at 5.7, which is the rate that you would come out of after your fixed term, we'll see that the fixed term, the payment jumps up from about 2,000 to about 3,300. And if we kind of predict some really doomsday scenarios of interest rates jumping up to 6-7%, you'll see that the SVR repayment jumps up very, very quickly. If we're lucky and interest rates go back somewhere approaching to what they used to be, then we can see here that payments reduce as a result. Let me take it back here and I'll look at the if we're looking at purchasing it, if this was a house purchase rather than just a remortgage, we could look at playing around with the deposit, increasing the amount to see what effect that has both on the initial repayment as well as the ongoing repayments afterwards. So if I go down as low as a 10% deposit, those initial payments jump up, as you can see. And if I push that up to kind of approaching a 50% deposit, you can see that, again, those payments, they get significantly lower. And you see all of this I've done with just a couple of modifications to the query, to add a couple of bindings in to change the numbers. There are, as Arthur says, there are 1,001 different use cases you can use these for. But I thought I'd do a fun one, to be honest. And when I first heard that this was released, I think this was the first thing my mind jumped to. Again, very topical. Sunday we have the World Cup beginning. And I'll just open this up. And I need to go into full screen mode first, don't I? Right. So you can see here, I lost count after a point. I thought this would be a quick and easy kind of thing, and it ended up being quite time consuming. I think I've got about 100 different input widgets here. And they're all mostly doing the same thing, just recording scores. But if you see when I enter a score into any of these widgets, you'll see the table update. So if I think that Ecuador are going to beat Qatar, you'll see then Ecuador, with that win, go to the top of the table, and Qatar are at the bottom with no points. It updates everything. So with one kind of widget, I'm updating the scored column, conceded, everything on here. And again, this works in a very similar way. However, the queries are a lot more complex. So I will show you, but it's good to highlight because it's a slightly different use in terms of we can take all the inputs, and in the code we can make comparisons between one and the other rather than a widget just having an effect on one particular area. I can say, okay, well, for this match, take the score of this input and this input, and if this score is bigger, then award this team the win. If this one is bigger, award this team. If they're the same, award them a draw, etc. So I'll just again show you. You can see here the number of queries I had to write here.
Wow. So who is going to win the World Cup, Manny?
All will be revealed. So you can see here the length of this query. It's quite a long one because I pulled in a data set with just the teams and the games, etc. And then I had to do a lot of finagling to kind of get them into the format that I wanted, etc. But you can see here, anywhere you see a bind in here in red, this is the input widget at work. And then, so you can see here, I've got all the groups. Sorry, because of this Zoom window, I'm trying to move it so I can see the rest of my screen. Okay. Okay, that'll do. So you can see here, I'm not going to go through and fill everything in now, but luckily enough, the first time I did it, I'm able to save my view and then just load it here now. So you can see, okay, this is kind of stolen my thunder a bit because it's taken me to the knockout stages, but you'll see I've gone through and entered every kind of, just quickly, what I think is going to happen in each game. And you can see as a result of the tables and who finishes first and second in the table, I'm then able to, again, just based on the input of the widgets, determine who goes to which knockout round. So you can see here how I've got it kind of set up. And actually, if I just kind of go back before let me clear this view. You'll see here that, all right, this is based on who finishes first and second in each group. However, we don't know the outcome of the quarterfinals or onwards because obviously we don't know who's going to be there. But actually, again, still able to kind of use this logic to, if I think Argentina are going to beat Denmark here, I put that in, and that dynamically fills Argentina in there. If I put this is around here. If I kind of say, okay, I think Argentina will beat them, and so on and so forth. If I think Argentina then win that one, and then so on and so forth. So yeah, I'll just load this back up again. And let's just say, okay, I've got Spain here to beat, I've got Brazil here to beat Spain, but if I kind of change that to Spain winning, it updates everything then. And so yeah, so this, in terms of the actual input widgets themselves, they're not the complex bit. The bit that got complex here was the number of different queries and the different kind of permutations based on who does what and who wins what, etc. But yeah, in terms, on the face of it, it's actually quite a basic use case as far as just making comparisons between the input of one widget against another. And with that, unless there's any questions, I will hand back over to Arthur.
Oh, quick question, actually. Any notes on performance? Having so many queries in your dashboard.
Well, because they're generally they're quite standard queries. If this is greater than this, then that. If this is equal to that, then that. You'll notice in all the while that I've kind of gone through this, there's not any real performance issues. I imagine the more complex queries get, then there may well be, but at least just in terms of just kind of for entering scores, etc. Generally, I've not found, although the dashboard inspector kind of when I run a performance check, it's given me a number of different just about the acceptable number of queries, etc. But they're quite lightweight, and you can see the load time. Generally, this runs quite quickly.
No, indeed. Can we get this onto you? Can we get this dashboard and these tables onto users' home pages to distract them from their day jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. You can embed it in a Salesforce home page, as you would any other dashboard. I don't know if your boss would recommend it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll take the risk. Cool. No further questions at this point. But yes, but I can certainly say there's been a lot of positive feedback on that.
Good to hear. Cheers.
Cool. So thank you for everyone who's tipped in with a very complimentary comment there. I shall let you carry on.
Cool. Okay, Arthur, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the demo. It's awesome. And yeah, this last dashboard is definitely the coolest input widget use case and dashboard I've seen in a while. So I'm sure if you make this available for a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of folks will just have fun, putting the scenarios or just even logging in every day to update what's going on. It's really cool. So I have to say I've screenshotted it. I'll be showcasing it at multiple places. So it's awesome.
Nice one. Cheers.
It's awesome. All right, let me just share my screen one more time. And hopefully it's coming up for everyone. So not looking as beautiful this time, but what I wanted to showcase here is we've kind of showed to you how it's done today, right? Using bindings, which is not super easy. And even though I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with it and there are resources out there, it also, not only it's not that easy, but it also means that once you added those bindings to edit the queries and visualizations and all that stuff, you need to go back to JSON, right? You're kind of stuck in that situation. So what I've done here is I've added an input widget, right? And so what I'm going to showcase is the work that we're currently doing and that will be coming to your environments in the release after that one, after the one that you currently have, right? So I believe it's spring 23, if I'm correct. And so what we've done is we've made it possible for you to add, to connect your input widget and the input value to any of the queries that you have in your dashboard. And not only one-to-one, but you can connect multiple widgets to a query or multiple widgets to multiple queries. It's very flexible. So let me show you how that works today, or how it will work tomorrow, rather. And so here you have an input widget, right? And I have a number widget. So let me just show you kind of what the query looks like. Very simple. Ignore the error message because this is a Steam environment. So this is very not the most stable one, but this is because we're pushing all the changes in there. So in here, what you say is just the count of rows, the basic number, right, coming in. And so let's say in this example, what I want to do is I want to be able to reference the value coming from my input and potentially do any calculations such as a percentage, right? So let's say here, the way it will work is you'll have to add a new column, and that new column will be referencing the value coming from your input, right? So how I will do this is I'll click this plus button, and in the add column button here, you used to have formula only, but now we've added the ability to add the input. So if I click on the input, it gives you a list of all the input widgets that are available on your dashboard. And here, after you pick this, it shows up as a new column. So something that you can now do very easily is I'll repeat the steps, but this time I'll have a formula, right? And then this formula, what I'll do is I can do any computation that I want. Right? So very easy, all clicks, no code. Hopefully much easier than going into the JSON and modifying all that stuff for you. But it's also kind of easier to visualize and keep track of. You can clearly see the values, the results, and so on. So here, if I do A times B divided by like 100, right, to do some kind of percentage on this value. So you can see here clearly the value is getting divided, but where it gets interesting is when you see the slider moving, right? So let me just duplicate this guy. And in this case, I'm going to show you the value after the rebate, right? So this is the percentage. So value after percentage. If I go into view mode now, oh yeah, beautiful. This is why, bear with me, this is a live demo on unstable environments. So I'm going to have to rebuild that real quick. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun. So let me do that. It won't look as pretty, but all right. So, all right. So let's go to column modes, and I'm going to use the inputs. All right. I'm hoping this is not going to crash once more. If it does, then I might not be able to go all the way to the end of the demo I wanted to show to you, but let's hope this works. So let me actually just use the same widget so you can see it, right? So now that I've created this connection, all right. So I've created the connection, right? And so this is the percentage value, right, that I'm passing. So let me try and duplicate this guy. And I hope this is not what's crashing it. So here, instead of showing the percentage, this is the initial value, right? This is the percentage. All right, and I can change this input to show the formatting as like a percentage, right? And so here you can use the slider. You can also use this input box if you want to change this to 10%. Update. You can clearly see that the count of rows here after the percentage has been applied is now 10% of the initial one, right? So all of this was done fairly easily, right? All through clicks, you go through the Explorer panel and you're able to reference the value coming from your inputs. And you can, as I was saying, right, if you want to add more to this, you can easily do that, right? If I want to, or actually, let me go the other way around. If I add another input widget, right, which is now input 2, and I go back to editing this one, I can now also add another input value coming from input 2, right? And so now you can do like any kind of combinations in your formula, right? You can add as many input sliders as you have on the dashboard. One thing I will also show is this is also available in query mode. We've added an add input button here, so you can see that how they appear in cycle mode, because we know it's not always through the UI, so you might have cycle queries that you want to add inputs to. So, and yeah, that's pretty much it on my end. On kind of the new way this will be working. Any questions? I didn't pay attention. Anything?
There haven't been any questions so far. I think everyone's just taking that in. No, I think so. It's just some positive feedback about the input widgets being a really good feature.
Awesome. Well, so the next thing I kind of wanted to cover was some of the future work that we're thinking of, and kind of where we could expand, this what if capabilities. And it doesn't only apply to the input widget, right? Like this new widget is a great way to kind of enable those what if scenarios and make it easier to run. But we can do more things, right? So with the input widgets, we're thinking of improving it in many different ways. One of the avenues we're thinking was, could you let the user pass a date as an input, right? And the true value behind this is for kind of predictions and where the user wants to see, like, in a year from now, how would my revenue look like, right? Can we get a prediction on that, right? And pass input dates or date inputs, sorry, as values. So that's definitely an area we're interested in. Another one is around unlocking more use cases with selections, right? So a very popular use case that our teams have brought up to us is, I have a list of opportunities, and among those opportunities, I want to be able to click, select the one that I want to, use as the scenario where I know I'm going to be closing down those three opportunities. So I want to be able to see, like, if I do close those three, but not the rest, how will this impact my forecast for the quarter, right? So using selections to drive those things. We're also thinking of including input widgets per row, right? You want to be able to, let's say you're a sales rep and you have a list of, or you're a sales rep director, right? And you have a list of sales rep. So each row in your table or repeater is a sales rep, and you want to see, like, for each of them, how are they doing on their quota, but you want to be able to change their performance or their quota performance, right? Or preview or prediction using a slider, right? So you change how well or how much do you think each of the sales rep might be able to achieve, and you see how this is going to be impacting your quarter performance, right? The overall one. Yep.
Indeed. So there has been a question popped into the chat by Prabhat. In Sackle, would typing in input _x in brackets work, or does it have to be added via the UI to update the metadata?
That's a good question. So as long as the input widget exists on your dashboard, I believe it works if you type it. I think so. I mean, you'll be able to double check. I'll ask with my team as well, because we haven't wrapped up the feature fully, so it's something I'll be able to test, but you should be able to do it. If the input widget has been created, I don't think it needs to go through the UI.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, one good use case, I think a lot of people who work in consultancy or especially for delivery managers, would be calculating what if scenarios when sort of forward planning projects. I know in sort of baselining, and if I was to move these resources here or different resources in, if I was to restructure my project slightly, what impact would that have on overall profit margins? So yeah, no, it's really really exciting.
Yeah, I see Jill also looking forward to the input widget per row. We understand. I'm sure there's a lot of use cases around that too. It's very powerful. But yeah, and this is where, to say thank you, and kind of open it up to you guys if you have any notes, remarks, questions for Maddie and I. Happy to stick around and answer them. But I think it's all on our end.
We still have a few minutes left. I don't believe there's been any new questions in. Anders just popped a question in. Anders, would you like to come off mute and perhaps talk through that one?
The very last one, right?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I was actually messing around with the mass update function in a demo today. I did without the VPN shutting down. And the mass update, I hadn't tried that before, but as I could see, it was just writing back into Salesforce, updating X amount of records, right? So would that be possible to do that? Let's say you were setting up for instance, you're planning the next quarter of opportunities and with sales reps and so on and so forth, and you mess around with all the sliders, and then you finally figure out what your scenario is, thereby all your targets, and then you could do a mass update back into the Salesforce system. Would that be possible, or does it need to be a one-to-one with the field that you are manipulating, and then into Salesforce? Would there be some code required between the two?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, no, it does. I think like it's something that we are also thinking, and I didn't add it to the more use cases, but it's definitely something we've thought of, which is the ability to write back, right? Because what you're doing is ultimately like you run those different scenarios. And so one thing we didn't mention, but I think actually Manny mentioned that, right? Like it works with save views, so you can kind of save this scenario and share it with others. So you have that capability, but I like the natural step that comes after this is, all right, like I've shared this scenario with my manager. I know that to get to our commits pipeline, like we need to enable like those opportunities. Now let's actually take action on this, right? That's the natural next step, and that's exactly what you brought up. Today, you can't really do it well because this slider, like you're driving a formula, right? This formula isn't tied to records and so on. No, so you would need to kind of find, you might be able to hack some stuff, like be able to, I know it because we're playing around with this with my manager, where we built this other dashboard. Let me actually see if I can pull it up. But we built this other dashboard where what you're pretty much able to do is through selections, you select those opportunities that you might want to commit to, and we're kicking off a Salesforce flow using a URL. And so so this flow is just changing the state of the opportunity, or kicking off a marketing campaign with those opportunities, right? And so this is what it does. And so we pass to the URL of the flow. As parameters, we pass through binding the selections that you've made. So you select, you have a table and you're able to select multiple rows, right? That those are the opportunities that we want to commit to because you've applied certain filters, and those are the 3 that you want to pass. Now, once you've selected those can be passed as bindings to the URL of the flow that you're kicking off. So you can do things.
Yeah.
It's not easy though, right? Like what I just described, like it'll take you a bit of time. But so realistically, it's not really using the input widget, because that's what I said at the very start, right? Is the input widget today allows you to drive those scenarios, but it's all through like an extra formula, right? Or like an extra query that's not really tied to your actual opportunities or records, etc. Right?
No, exactly. All right.
So it's slightly different, and this is something we'd love to get everyone's feedback, right? Like we're just shipping this new feature, and we're super excited. We know like everyone's very excited about this because it's going to open up like a lot of different use cases around this in many different industries. Now, like what we want to hear from everyone is, what is the next thing that we need to do and we need to improve? Like, is it, per row? Is it actionability, as you mentioned? Do we want dates? Like everyone, will have something, you have something, like, so that's kind of where we need to wait a little bit for this feature to bake in and get everyone's feedback to figure out like, hey, where do we want to go next, right?
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Yeah. So it's kind of what the idea is fun, but it's not quite there yet. The clarity way.
Yeah, it depends how far do you want to push that, right? Like if you want to bring the actionability to the table, like it's a little bit more complex.
Yeah. Nonetheless, very nice new feature, I must say.
But yeah, it's great to give like, at least it gives the ability for end users to drive their own scenarios, right? Like you don't have to mash up all the work for them. You just provide the sliders connected to the rest of the queries, and then they can run the scenarios freely, right?
Yeah, and also I did a speech the other day around architecting on analytics, and where you would like to make sure that processes that are actually outside of Salesforce are actually being included in Salesforce. So setting up a new budgets and targets and all this is actually a process that is outside of Salesforce, maybe going on outside of Salesforce. It might even be on a whiteboard somewhere. But having a tool like this, then you start including your even more processes and processes like this into Salesforce, right? So
I'm sorry. Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
so meaning that you're including more and more of your business processes they're included in Salesforce instead of being outside of Salesforce, just flying around. You start including them into Salesforce.
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was my question. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Anders. Cool. And I don't think there's been any more questions in the chat.
I think Evan is asking about limitations.
Have I missed one?
Evan's asking about limitations.
Sorry, you're correct. Yeah, yeah.
That's a very generic question. Could you be like slightly, or give a little bit more insight? Like, what kind of limitation you're thinking? Like, just maybe I can
come off mute, Evan, if it's easier.
For the inputs. So, what do you mean, like the number of inputs that can be passed to a query, for instance? Feel free to come off mute. Maybe you cannot. So I'll give the generic answer, and then So there's no real limitations. You saw in Manny's demo, he had like hundreds of input sliders or input widgets all connected to like one query or multiple queries. So there's no real limitation around the number of input widgets or the number of connections you can make to a query. It really is up to you to achieve what you want. Obviously, the more complex the query, the slower your dashboard will get, right? But no limitations are implemented. So it really is just widgets and queries. So you can have 100 widgets connected to one query. You can have one widget connected to 100 queries. It really is up to you how you want to customize it. We try to make it as flexible as possible. You see, is this then still all async native process then too? What do you mean by async? So this is running, like as you make the changes, it applies live, but this is all on your data sets. So it's not live data, if that's what you're asking. Depends on what the query is made of, right? Like if you have a query that's coming from, for instance, what is it called? Snowflake, right? A Snowflake direct query. That's direct data, right? So it's pulling the data directly and fetching it from data lake like Snowflake. I have to double check, but like I don't see why you wouldn't be able to add an input like this connection, and you'll be able to generate scenarios, right? Because what the input is doing is really just using your value, right? The number widget that I had, the value, and then it's multiplying it, dividing it, whatever, by the value entered by the user, and then returning to you the result of that calculation. So it should work as well as live data. It all depends on what kind of data you're using. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. Thank you, Arthur. That's yeah, I think got to an answer with that one. Cool. There haven't been any other questions.
I think that was it as far as questions.
I think, yeah. So unless anyone else has any other questions, I think it will just be a time just to give a nice round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much, Arthur. Thank you, Manny. Both brilliant demos, brilliant presentations, very insightful, and yeah, really good. Really exciting. Lovely to see new features coming in, and yeah, I think they're going to be very powerful, well adopted features.